Welcome to Africo Tales. The Lagos night pulsed like a restless heart, a glittering tapestry woven with ambition and forgotten dreams. High above the bustling streets, in the penthouse of the city's newest architectural marvel, Tunde Alakija, a man carved from ambition and draped in bespoke silk, raised a champagne flute. The sparkle of diamonds on his wife, Amara's, wrist rivaled the distant city lights, yet a cold dread, sharp as a broken glass shard, began to prickle at his senses. Tonight, celebrating his latest triumph, he felt an unfamiliar chill amid the warmth of 1,000 congratulations and the intoxicating scent of success. He, Tunde, who had tamed the concrete jungle and bent its will to his own, was about to discover that some conquests defied the power of even the mightiest fortune. The foundations of his perfectly curated world, he would soon learn, were built not on solid rock, but on quicksand, ready to swallow him whole with a single, devastating revelation. The air in the penthouse was thick with the scent of French, perfume, expensive cigars, and the sweet promise of unlimited prosperity. Below, Lagos sprawled like a living, breathing entity, its endless stream of headlights a testament to the ceaseless grind and unstoppable spirit of a city that never slept. Tunde Alakija, architect of his own empire, a self-made titan whose name was synonymous with innovation and wealth, surveyed the scene with a practiced, almost bored satisfaction. He moved through the throng of politicians, celebrities, and business moguls, a king in his own meticulously constructed castle. Every handshake was firm, every smile acknowledged, every compliment absorbed into the very fabric of his being. He had started with nothing, a boy from the dusty streets of Apapa, and now he stood at the apex, a testament to what sheer will and relentless ambition could achieve in a land where opportunities, though abundant, often eluded those without. The Midas touch, his tailored suit, a masterpiece of Italian craftsmanship, felt like a second skin, reflecting the confidence that radiated from him like heat from a desert sun. His gaze drifted to Amara, his wife, a vision in emerald green silk, her laughter like wind chimes carried on the soft breeze. She was a jewel, perfectly chosen, perfectly placed beside him, the elegant complement to his formidable presence. She glided through conversations, her grace effortless, her beauty captivating, drawing eyes and admiration wherever she went. She was the one who, in the early days, had shared his modest apartment, eaten fufu with him from a communal bowl, and whispered words of encouragement when the struggle seemed insurmountable. Now, she held court by the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights framing her silhouette, a picture of ultimate sophistication. Tunde swelled with a mixture of pride and possessiveness. She was his, undeniably, irrevocably, a treasure among his many treasures. He had given her everything: designer clothes, exotic vacations, a life beyond anything she could have dreamed. What more could a woman ask for? He believed, with the unshakable conviction of the truly successful, that his success had bought them an impenetrable shield against life's lesser troubles, a guarantee of happiness. When a man's pocket is full, his departed mother used to say, his eyes often see only gold, not the cracks in his home. He dismissed the faint whisper of that old proverb, drowning it out with another sip of champagne, convinced his home was rock solid, impervious to any fissure. As the night deepened and the revelry grew louder, Tunde found himself increasingly restless. He had done his rounds, exchanged pleasantries, solidified alliances, and basked in the glow of his achievements. Yet, a subtle disquiet gnawed at him, a tiny, persistent insect buzzing at the edges of his perfect evening. He noticed Amara, Yes, still beautiful, still charming, but her laughter seemed a touch too bright, her eyes a shade too distant when they met his across the crowded room. She was engaged in a particularly animated conversation with a group near the bar, and Tunde observed her for a moment, an odd sense of detachment settling over him. One of the men in the group, lean and handsome, with an easy smile, seemed to hold her attention a little too raptly. Kemi, he remembered, an old associate from one of his earlier ventures, now running a flourishing art gallery. Tunde vaguely recalled him and Amara having crossed paths years ago, before Tunde's meteoric rise. A fleeting image flashed in his mind. Amara, years ago, in a simple print dress, her hair braided, her face alight with an earnest hope that mirrored his own. They had promised each other the world, not the one he had built with steel and concrete, but one forged from shared dreams and unwavering loyalty. He remembered a time when her eyes would seek his out constantly, a tether in the chaos of their striving lives. Tonight, that tether felt frayed, almost invisible. He shook his head, dismissing the thought as the foolish introspection of a man, tired from a long, demanding week. The ancestral spirits often whispered warnings, his grandmother would say, when something was amiss. But Tunde, a man of logic and enterprise, rarely paid heed to such superstitious murmurings. He was above such things, wasn't he? His empire was built on tangible assets, not ethereal prophecies. Still, the uneasy feeling persisted, a prickle beneath his skin that even the finest linen could not soothe. He watched Kimi lean in closer. To Amara, a casual intimacy in the gesture that made Tunde's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Amara's smile, then, was different, softer, more genuine, perhaps, than the one she offered to his business partners. He told himself it was just a trick of the light, the champagne playing havoc with his perception. But deep down, where the ancient instincts of a man lay buried beneath layers of modern sophistication, a tiny alarm bell began to toll. He felt a sudden, inexplicable urge to be alone, to escape the suffocating adulation and the growing sense that something vital was slipping through his manicured fingers, unnoticed by anyone but the ancestral ghosts he refused to believe in. The irony was not lost on him, though he wouldn't admit it. He, who commanded respect and loyalty from thousands, felt a burgeoning vulnerability in his own home, on his own triumphant night. A sudden, urgent phone call from a key investor pulled Tunde away from the main celebration. He excused himself, navigating through the throng of well-wishers, his smile fixed, his mind already calculating the next strategic move. He headed towards a quieter, more secluded part of the penthouse, a dimly lit private lounge intended for intimate conversations and discreet deals. The rich mahogany and opulent velvet draperies swallowed the distant strains of Afrobeats and laughter, creating an oasis of hushed tones. As he pushed open the heavy, ornate door, his fingers fumbling for his phone, the world tilted on its axis. The air thickened, heavy with a forbidden intimacy, a stark contrast to the sterile opulence outside. There, bathed in the soft, ambient glow of a standing lamp, was Amara and Kemi. They weren't merely talking. Kemi's arm was around her waist, pulling her close, and Amara's head was nestled against his shoulder, her eyes closed, a look of profound, almost painful relief etched on her face. Then Kemi lowered his head, his lips tracing the curve of her neck, and in that fleeting, agonizing second, Tunde saw it. Amara's hand rising to caress the back of Kemi's head, her fingers tangling in his dark hair. The world dissolved. into a kaleidoscope of shattered glass. The champagne flute in Tunde's hand slipped, clattering to the plush carpet, the sound shockingly loud in the sudden, suffocating silence of his mind. He froze, a statue carved from disbelief and searing pain. His breath caught in his throat, a suffocating knot of betrayal. The vibrant city lights outside the window, moments ago a symbol of his dominion, now seemed to mock him, each tiny gleam a shard reflecting the splintering of his soul. His vision blurred, not from tears, but from the sheer force of the blow. The laughter and music from the party outside became a distant, mocking hum, a soundtrack to his personal catastrophe. He saw Amara pull away slightly, her eyes opening, meeting Kemi's with an unspoken intimacy that pierced Tunde deeper than any knife. He felt a primal roar building in his chest, but no sound escaped. He was a ghost, invisible, watching his life unravel in slow motion, feeling every agonizing second of it. The man who owned a significant chunk of Lagos, who commanded legions, stood utterly powerless, his carefully constructed facade crumbling into dust. The vibrant music and clinking glasses continued to echo in the background, a cruel counterpoint to Amara's internal turmoil. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of guilt and desperation. The brief, stolen moment with Kemi in the quiet lounge had been a fleeting reprieve, a desperate gulp of air in a life that felt increasingly suffocating. She knew the risks, the monumental betrayal, the scandal if Tunde were to find out. But the truth was, she felt invisible to him, a decorative fixture in his grand, opulent life. He saw her as the perfect wife, the flawless accessory to his success, but never truly saw her. He brought her dreams, yes, but they were his dreams, gilded and elaborate, not the quiet, tender ones she yearned for. Kemi was a ghost from a past life, a time before Tunde's empire consumed them both. He understood her in a way Tunde no longer did. He remembered the girl who loved poetry and quiet evenings, not just exclusive parties and designer labels. Their paths had crossed by chance a few months ago, a casual encounter that had quickly blossomed into something potent and dangerous, fueled by shared memories and Amara's profound loneliness. He listened to her, truly listened, to the unspoken burden she carried, the weight of a secret shame that had gnawed at her for years, their inability to have children. The doctors, the endless treatments, the whispered judgments from Tunde's extended family, aunties whose stares felt like daggers. A woman's worth is measured by the fruit of her womb. A harsh Yoruba proverb, often repeated in hushed tones, had become her constant tormentor. Tunde, immersed in his empire, had dismissed her fears, her pain, her longing for a child as women's wahala, something to be solved with more money, more specialists. He never truly understood the crushing weight of expectation in a patriarchal society, where a barren woman, no matter how beautiful or accomplished, was often seen as incomplete. Kemi, himself a man who understood loss, offered solace, empathy, a listening ear, and a comfort that had long since vanished from her marriage. Their shared moments were not about lavish gifts or grand gestures. They were about stolen glances, hushed conversations, and the profound intimacy of understanding. Tonight, amidst the grandeur of Tunde's triumph, she had felt particularly adrift. A beautiful trophy on display, and Kemi's presence had been an irresistible anchor in her sea of quiet despair. The kiss had been impulsive, a desperate reach for connection, a cry for help that Tunde, in his golden bubble, had never heard. The music finally faded, the last of the guests departed, leaving behind a battlefield of discarded champagne flutes and the lingering scent of excess. Tunda and Amara returned to their mansion in Ikoyi, the silence in the car deafening, punctuated only by the hum of the luxury sedan. Tunda drove, his hands clenched on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed on the road, but seeing nothing. Amara sat beside him, a statuesque figure, her emerald dress now a heavy shroud, her face carefully composed. She felt his coldness, a palpable wall between them, and a knot of dread twisted in her stomach. Had he seen? Had he known? The thought sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the night's cool air. They entered the sprawling mansion, usually a sanctuary of controlled luxury, now a cavernous echo chamber for Tunda's unspoken rage. He moved with a stiff precision, dismissing the house staff with a curt wave, refusing to meet Amara's tentative glance. He went straight to his study, the heavy door thudding shut behind him, leaving Amara alone in the vast, silent living room. She stood there for a long moment, the glittering city lights still visible through the expansive windows, but they offered no comfort, only a stark reminder of the glittering facade of her life. The world Tunda had built for her was beautiful, yet it felt like a gilded prison. Inside his study, Tunda poured himself a measure of whiskey, his hand trembling slightly. He stared at the glowing city, the sprawling network of roads and buildings, and began to piece together fragments. Amara's distant laughter, the way she had averted her eyes when he approached, the almost imperceptible intimacy between her and Kemi throughout the evening. He had been so consumed by his own success, so blinded by his belief in his own invincibility, that he had missed the glaring signs. He remembered an incident weeks ago, a late-night phone call Amara had taken, whispering into the receiver while stepping out onto the balcony, claiming it was her cousin. He had dismissed it then, too busy with a new deal. Now, every forgotten detail, every subtle shift in her demeanor, every unanswered question resurfaced with agonizing clarity, twisting in his gut like a poisoned blade. The silence of the mansion was terrifying, pregnant with the unspoken, silent accusation that hung heavy in the opulent air, threatening to suffocate them both. The next morning dawned, not with the usual Lagos bustle, but with a suffocating quietness in the Alakija household. Tunda remained holed up in his study, a fortress of his own making, his mind a whirlwind of accusations and pain. Amara, after a sleepless night, paced their bedroom, the weight of the unspoken growing heavier with each passing hour. The pretense could not hold. By mid-morning, Tunda emerged, his face a mask of cold fury, his eyes devoid of any warmth. He found Amara in the grand living room, staring blankly at a priceless piece of art, a vibrant canvas that now seemed to mock their broken reality. His voice was low, dangerously calm, each word a hammer blow. "Amara," he began, "who was that man? And what exactly was happening in the private lounge last night?" Amara flinched, her carefully constructed composure shattering. Her breath hitched, and she turned slowly, her face pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and resignation. There was no denying it, no clever lie to weave this time. The truth, raw and bitter, hung in the air between them. Initially, a torrent of excuses tumbled from her lips, desperate attempts to minimize, to deflect. But Tunda's unwavering gaze, hard and unforgiving, pierced through her defenses. He saw not just a confession, but a deep, long-simmering pain in Natsini, her eyes, a pain he was only now beginning to truly see. "Tell me everything, Amara," he commanded, his voice tight. "Or this will be the end of us." Her shoulders slumped, and she finally broke. Tears streamed down her face, tears of guilt, of sorrow, but also of a profound, desperate relief. "His name is Kemi," she whispered, her voice hoarse with emotion. He was a friend from before, from way back. And Tunde, I'm so sorry." The apology was genuine, but it was quickly followed by a flood of suppressed frustration. "But Tunde, you don't understand. You were never there. You built this empire, yes, but you built a wall around your heart, around us. Do you know what it's like to be me? To be the perfect wife, the barren wife, in this house, in this society? The whispers, the looks from your aunties, the constant pressure to give you an heir? I tried, Tunde. I tried everything. And you were always too busy, too important, too focused on the next deal to even see my pain, to hold my hand, to truly listen when I cried myself to sleep." She paused, gasping for air, the dam finally broken. "Kemi, he just listened. He saw me, Tunde. He saw me, not just Mrs. Tunde Alakija. He reminded me of a time when we valued more than just money and status. He gave me comfort when I felt utterly alone, drowning in this golden cage you built for us." The revelation was a seismic shock, a profound confession that ripped through the carefully constructed fabric of their marriage, uncovering not just betrayal, but a gaping wound of loneliness and unfulfilled yearning. Amara's confession hung in the air, a bitter, palpable entity, suffocating Tunde more than any silent anger could have. The word barren echoed in his mind, a sharp, cruel sound he had deliberately avoided for years. He had dismissed her struggles, minimized her pain, told her to take it easy, to trust God, all while subtly financing endless consultations and treatments, believing his money could buy a child just as it bought everything else. He had been so proud of his ability to provide, blind to the fact that his provision was often devoid of the very thing she truly needed: his presence, his empathy, his raw, unvarnished love. The weight of his own culpability pressed down on him, a crushing burden that made his vast wealth feel utterly worthless. Later that evening, exhausted and emotionally drained, Tunde drifted into a troubled sleep. His dreams were vivid, unsettling. He found himself wandering through a dense primeval forest, the sounds of ancient drums throbbing in the distance. Suddenly, his late grandmother appeared before him, not as the frail woman he remembered, but as a towering figure, her eyes wise and knowing. She spoke softly, yet her voice resonated with the power of ages. "Tunde, my son," she said, her voice like rustling dry leaves. "You chased the wind, believing it was gold. You built your palace high, but forgot the strength of the soil beneath. The baobab tree stands tall because its roots run deep, not because its leaves touch the sky. You fed your ambition, but starved your home. You forgot that a river without banks floods the village. Greed knows no shores. You sought to own all, but lost the precious few you truly held." She gestured towards a shimmering, fleeting image of Amara, weeping silently. "The spirit of our women, Tunde, is not to be bought with cowries or gold, but nourished with understanding and respect. The well-being of the home, the village, rests on this balance." He awoke with a jolt, the dream lingering, its imagery and words etched deeply into his psyche. The wisdom of his ancestors long relegated to quaint folklore, now felt undeniably real, a stark judgment on his modern folly. The next day, he sought out his eldest auntie, Ea Shade, a matriarch whose words, though often blunt, were always steeped in profound wisdom. He recounted, in broad strokes, Amara's pain and his own painful discovery. Ea Shade listened, her ancient eyes twinkling, with a mix of sadness and understanding. "My son," she said, her voice raspy, "when a wound festers unseen, it will eventually burst. You gave her riches, yes, but did you give her solace? A woman yearns for more than a full purse. She yearns for a full heart, a listening ear, especially when the shame of the empty womb weighs heavy. You built a magnificent house, Tunde, but you forgot to build a home within it, a sanctuary for her spirit. The spirits do not care for your skyscrapers, only for the truth in your heart." Her words, echoing his dream, began to chip away at the fortress of his pride, forcing him to confront not just Amara's actions, but the profound failures of his own heart. The ancestral whispers, through his dream and Ea Shade's words, were impossible to ignore. Tunde, the man who prided himself on control, felt a profound loss of it. He began to revisit his memories, not from the perspective of the wronged husband, but as an introspection into his own actions. He saw the countless times Amara had tried to reach him, her tentative questions about his day, her quiet suggestions for a weekend getaway that he had brushed aside for more important business meetings. He remembered her tearful confessions after a failed fertility treatment, which he had met with logical solutions. "Let's try another clinic. We'll fly in the best doctors." Always offering a fix, never simply offering comfort. He realized, with a sickening clarity, that he had treated their marriage and Amara's emotional well-being like another business project to be managed, rather than a sacred bond to be nurtured. His wealth, once his greatest source of pride, now felt like a heavy, isolating shroud. He recalled Amara's growing silence, the way she would sometimes simply gaze out at the Lagos skyline, a faraway look in her eyes he had dismissed as wistfulness for his latest acquisition. He saw now it was a silent plea, a profound loneliness. The stigma of infertility in their culture was immense, a burden he had never fully comprehended, shielded as he was by his male privilege and his colossal fortune. Amara, however, bore the brunt of it, the constant pressure from his own family, the subtle, pitying glances from friends. He had been so focused on his external achievements that he had become emotionally deaf to the clamor of her inner world. He had provided a gilded cage, but she yearned for a garden where her soul could breathe. A part of him, the old, arrogant Tunde, still yearned for revenge, for swift justice against Kemi, the interloper. But the new, emerging Tunde, humbled by the weight of truth, felt a strange pull towards understanding. He had his security team discreetly investigate Kemi, not to find dirt, but to understand his background. He discovered Kemi was a widower, a sensitive artist who had suffered immense personal loss. More importantly, Kemi and Amara had indeed been close friends in their university days, a bond that predated Tunde's rise to prominence. Kemi had offered Amara not just a shoulder, but a mirror, reflecting the vibrant, soulful woman Tunde's ambition had long overshadowed. This wasn't about excusing Amara's betrayal, but about illuminating the vast emotional desert he had unwittingly created, a void that had made her vulnerable to solace from another. The realization was a painful, humbling blow, forcing Tunde to confront the uncomfortable truth that his success far from guaranteeing loyalty, had ironically created the very conditions for its unraveling. He was faced with a profound moral dilemma: to demand retribution for the betrayal of his trust, or to seek a deeper understanding of the needs he had so grievously overlooked. The days that followed were a surreal tableau of quiet anguish and profound introspection. Tunde, for the first time in years, stopped chasing the next deal, the next acquisition. He spent hours in the quiet solitude of his study, no longer plotting market strategies, but sifting through the wreckage of his marriage and his own soul. He wrestled with his pride, his anger, and the crushing weight of his own blindness. His initial instinct for retribution, for making Amara pay for her betrayal, slowly began to recede, replaced by a painful, nascent understanding. He thought of Iya Shade's words, of his grandmother's dream, and the ancient wisdom that valued communal harmony, wisdom, and forgiveness above all else. When the rain falls. An old Yoruba saying went, "It does not fall on one man's house alone." See, the storm in their home was a shared one, and he, Tunda, had contributed to its gathering clouds. He knew he had to talk to Amara again, not to accuse, but to listen, truly listen. He found her one evening in the sprawling garden, tending to her hibiscus plants, her once vibrant spirit now subdued, almost broken. He approached her, not with the thundering authority of the millionaire, but with the hesitant vulnerability of a man stripped bare. "Amara," he began, his voice softer than she had heard it in years, "I have been thinking, not just about what you did, but about what I didn't do. I never truly understood your pain, the pressure you felt about having children. I never truly listened. I was a fool, blinded by my own ambition." The words were difficult, each, one costing him dearly, but once spoken, they released a torrent of relief. Amara looked up, her eyes wide, glistening with unshed tears. She had expected anger, recrimination, divorce papers, but not this. "Tunde," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He sat beside her on the garden bench, a rare moment of shared quiet, away from the gilded walls of their mansion. He listened, as she recounted, without embellishment, the years of silent suffering, the feeling of inadequacy, the crushing expectation from his family, and his own unconscious neglect. He heard her speak of Kemi, not as a lover, but as a lifeline, someone who offered empathy and validation when she felt her worth plummeting. He did not condone her actions, but for the first time he understood the desperate human need that had driven them. He realized that true loyalty was earned not through lavish gifts, but through unwavering presence, emotional connection, and shared vulnerability. It was a painful, humbling lesson, unfolding beneath the ancient, silent gaze of the moon and the distant, throbbing pulse of the city he had once thought he fully commanded. The path to redemption was not easy, nor was it paved with immediate forgiveness. It was a slow, arduous journey, marked by raw honesty and difficult conversations. Tunde and Amara began attending counseling, not as a formality, but as a desperate attempt to excavate the buried landscape of their marriage. Tunde learned to truly listen, to shed the layers of his corporate persona and connect with Amara on an emotional level he had long since forgotten. He spoke to his family, unequivocally defending Amara against the subtle pressures and cruel expectations regarding children, making it clear that their worth as a couple was not defined by their procreative ability. He realized that the concept of family was far broader than just bloodlines, encompassing acceptance, support, and profound love. This act alone, a public declaration of his unconditional support, began to heal wounds that had festered for years in Amara's heart. Their decision regarding their future was not a simple one, nor was it a fairy tale ending where everything was perfectly mended. They chose to recommit to each other, not out of obligation, but out of a deeper, more mature understanding of love. They explored adoption, deciding that nurturing a child who needed a home was a far greater testament to their love than the pursuit of a biological heir. Tunde, too, underwent a profound transformation. He began to delegate more, to spend more time at home, to rediscover the simple joys of shared meals and quiet evenings. His business empire continued to thrive, but it no longer consumed him. He founded an initiative to support women struggling with infertility, a silent tribute to Amara's pain and a testament to his newfound empathy, investing his wealth not just in profit, but in purpose and communal well-being. One evening, months later, Tunda and Amara stood on the same penthouse balcony where his world had shattered. The Lagos skyline still glittered, a breathtaking panorama of ambition and life, but now Tunde looked at it with different eyes. It was no longer a monument to his personal power, but a dynamic, interconnected organism, a reflection of life's intricate tapestry of joy and sorrow, triumph and redemption. Amara leaned into him, her hand intertwining with his, a silent understanding passing between them. The scar of betrayal remained, a faint echo, but it had been interwoven with threads of honesty, wisdom, and forgiveness. They had learned that true success was not measured by the height of their skyscraper, but by the depth of their connection, and that the richest treasures in life were not bought with money, but cultivated with an open heart. The axe forgets, but the tree remembers. His grandmother had often said, but Tunda now understood that while the past could not be erased, a new future could be carved, one stroke of wisdom and forgiveness at a time. If you enjoyed the ED story, then like, subscribe, and share this story with your loved ones. Also, tell us in the comments where you are watching from.